election. Meanwhile, the Biden campaign is taking heat for botching its Hispanic outreach efforts in Florida. The Miami Herald slamming the Biden campaign's opening of its Miami-Dade Democrat Hispanic Caucus office. In a new op-ed titled Three Gringos in Coral Gables Launch Biden-Harris Latino Campaign, said Trombone, the piece pointing out the campaign didn't feature any Latinos or, quote, the stars of the election, President Biden and Kamala Harris at the opening party, even though they've been campaigning in other Hispanic population states like Arizona. Instead, the campaign sent Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff, Florida Democrat Party Chair Nikki Fried, and Miami-Dade County Mayor Daniela Cava to introduce the initiative. Joining me now is former Utah Congressman, Fox News contributor, and author of The Puppeteers, the people who control America, Jason Chaffetz, and Democrat consultant and former House Judiciary Committee Chief Counsel, Julian Epstein. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. Great to see you both. Julian, let me start with you. Get your reaction to all of this.
Well, Hillary Clinton won the Hispanic vote by nearly 30%. Joe Biden won it by nearly 7%. Ron DeSantis, Republican governor of Florida, where I am right now, won the Hispanic vote by nearly 15%. This is much more than a rollout problem for the Democrats. What the Democrats are seeing right now is a hemorrhaging of their base, most particularly the Hispanic vote, which could actually split in the 2024 election as opposed to where it was just a few years ago, where Democrats were winning, by 30, 35 points. So this is a major change. And if you look at the reasons why, Hispanic voters, like working class black voters, are very centrist, moderate voters. They don't like what they're seeing on the economic performance. They don't like where this administration has been on cultural issues, whether it's immigration, whether it's crime, whether it is a host of gender issues. They think the party has become, for the most part, a party of college elites. And that has not done well for this traditional Democratic base, and the notion that demography is destiny, which is a theory Democrats have held for a long time, which looks a little bit bankrupt right now. So
do you think Joe Biden doesn't realize that, Julian, or do you think it's somebody else calling the shots? I mean, how do you miss that?
I think what the problem for the Democrats that they have to extricate themselves from is that the intersectional left, the activist left, has taken over the policymaking of the party, and the White House staff, for the most part, wants to be the cool kid on the social media block and does not want to push back against the activist left, even though all of the data shows, both on economic issues and cultural issues, that the party positions right now are out of step with the majority of the voters. And this is why, in my opinion, this is Donald Trump's election to lose. He's ahead in the battleground states, and in most polls, it shows him with a significant advantage.
Yeah. Jason, how do you see it?
I think Julian's actually spot on. I think the Democratic Party of old, even just back 10, 15 years ago, there's no place for a more centrist person. I think the progressive left has taken over, taken some radical positions that most people can't look at. And look at Arizona. Kyrsten Sinema had a legitimate case to be truly an independent. She had to leave the Democratic Party, and then she got out of politics. I mean, there's no room for somebody to be an independent-minded person like that. And I think Donald Trump is doing exceptionally well with minority communities because it is about policy, and they do care about these things like inflation and the cost of life in America, safety, security, all of those things. That's why Trump and I think Republicans are going to do quite well. I don't think the Democrats are going to course correct because every time they try to signal that, hey, maybe we should think about that, they just get pummeled from the radical far left part of the party.
Yeah, well, the Biden campaign is out with a new ad in an attempt to appeal to Nikki Haley supporters. Watch this.
Bird brain. I call it bird brain. Nikki Haley has made an unholy alliance with rhinos, never Trumpers, Americans for no prosperity. She was sitting there like...
She's gone crazy. She's a very angry person.
Jason, what's your reaction to this?
The nomination process is over. Donald Trump has dominated every single part of the way. I think there should be more of an effort to bring the Nikki Haley supporters, even though they're small and they're minority. The Republicans need every one of them, and there should be more of an outreach to try to get her and that people that voted for her to come to Donald Trump, because voting for Joe Biden is not an acceptable outcome.
Yeah. Julian, do you think that Trump will be able to do it?
Yes, I do. I think if Democrats continue with this strategy, he will be. I think the idea that you run a campaign ad pointing out that in the Republican primary that candidates are trash-talking each other, I think that's sort of silly. I mean, everyone knows, all the Republican voters and swing voters know that candidates trash talk during primaries. They write it off. It's sort of baked into the process. The reason I think Biden is going to have a very, very difficult time attracting Haley voters is because of policy. And look what Joe Biden and the White House are doing right now. They are catering to the anti-Israel vote. You're not going to get Haley voters by pandering to what people refer to as the Dearborn vote or the anti-Israel vote. It's not going to happen in the same way that this administration, I think, has taken very unhelpful positions with respect to deterrence in the Mideast, and particularly with Iran. And you look at the result that we've had now, not just with Hamas, but with the Houthis and all of the attacks on American targets in Syria and Iraq. I think the instinct of the White House, again, to track left, to appeal to the activist left, is exactly the wrong thing to do if you want to try to attract Haley voters.
And Julian, I think it's not just the White House. I mean, remember Chuck Schumer's speech on the Senate floor, attacking, Benjamin Netanyahu, saying he wants elections right now. Look, this guy and the whole state of Israel is in the fight of their lives. Now, publicly, you want to take out Bibi Netanyahu?
Yeah, I thought it was very inappropriate for Senator Schumer to do that. I think, as I've said elsewhere, all you have to do is look at what happened with the Corbyn Labour Party in the United Kingdom, and to see that it ends in no good place for the left when you sort of track towards this anti-Israeli left. And for the people calling for ceasefire, I would say one thing: do you really believe in your heart of hearts that Hamas wants a ceasefire? No, it doesn't want a ceasefire. Hamas wants to rid Israel from the face of the earth. And we could have a ceasefire today if Hamas would lay down its arms and release the hostages, but Hamas wouldn't do that. So I think the Democrats are tracking left, far left, and trying to appease the anti-Israel vote, and I think it is wrong from a moral point of view. It shows, I think, moral confusion. But also importantly, I think it is bad politics for the Democratic Party, where most American voters stand squarely behind Israel in this fight against terrorism.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the key moves, wrong-headed moves of the Democrats, not to get solidly behind Israel during this period that actually has affected his base. Isn't that right, Julian?
Well, yes, and I think what would be smart if Joe Biden wanted to take a smarter position, like he could track to the center on immigration, he could track to the center on a whole bunch of issues. What he should do on Israel is he should address the country. He should have an Oval Office address and say, this is why this is so important. Hamas is an ideology that is bent. It is a Nazi, Hitler-like ideology that is bent on first killing every Jew it can find and then attacking the West. And this is why it is so important for Israel to prevail. And use the Oval Office, use the soapbox as a way of persuading Americans why this is so important, rather than catering to these protesters that you see that you just had on your screen a moment ago. That would be a much smarter strategy.
Perhaps, but Jason, it doesn't appear that this president wants to lean toward the middle. I mean, if he wanted to do something on the border, he could. He walked into the Oval Office on day one and overturned all of Trump's safety at the border.
Yeah, listen, this President Biden, he goes to the squishy sound of whoever's outside his office protesting at the moment. I mean, you hear stories about interns coming out and protesting this president. The beauty of what Donald Trump did, whether you like him or not, whether you'd vote for Donald Trump or not, you know what? Donald Trump offered clarity. There was no doubt about it. Our allies loved us. And our enemies feared us because the president presided over one of the safest portions of my entire life because they knew that President Trump meant business. And you know what? That's an important thing, particularly in a war footing.
All right, we will leave it there, gentlemen. Great conversation. We so appreciate your time. Jason Chaffetz, Julian Epstein, thank you, gentlemen. Have a great day. We will be right back. Stay with us.